Hello. Now, the UK is in deep trouble, not just socially, but economically. We have had decades of economic mismanagement, but the current government that we have has a Chancellor of the Exchequer who is Rachel Reeves. Now, she said before she came into government, before the Labour Party won the last election through default mainly, that she was an economist, but it turns out that she wasn't actually. She worked in a lesser role in the accounts department or the customer services department or something, which isn't particularly clear. But she is now the person running the UK economy. And she decided recently to put a picture of a communist on the wall in her office in 11 Downing Street, which is next to 10 Downing Street. It's far more famous, but 11 Downing Street is the official residence of the Chancellor of the Exchequer. She made her first budget in October 2024, and it was an absolute disaster, and people have been talking about it ever since. There is an attack on farmers, on businesses, on workers very, very directly, on top of all of the money that the Labour government is wasting on schemes here, there and everywhere, rather than putting money to fund public services in this country. But she went to a factory in Oxford this week to make a speech on how she was going to stimulate growth in the UK. But it was just full of meaningless platitudes and absolute nonsense and pie in the sky. Essentially, she talked about lots of long-term infrastructure projects which would need lots of government money to put into them before they even were created, and they're not even going to be completed for 10, 20, 30 years. And this is the nonsense of what she was saying, as well as some other things I'll talk about and get into, which are very, very damaging for the countryside, our heritage, and local democracy as well, in terms of changing planning regulations and the planning system that we have in England and Wales. And Scotland, slightly different. It's run by the Scottish government, but they're not very good either. So what she said is to stimulate growth, she's going to approve a third runway at Heathrow. Well, that isn't going to be ready for a sort of 20 years or more if it does get started. But the thing is, this debate on a third runway at Heathrow has been going on for a very long time. It really is just a non-starter, in my opinion, because the third runway will be shorter than the two existing runways that are there. And it also requires the demolition of Harmondsworth and the other Heathrow villages, which are to the north of Heathrow, which are medieval villages, beautiful parts of our history that are still there. And I'm very, very much opposed to the demolition of whole villages in order to build a third runway at Heathrow, which really isn't going to be up to the job, because it will be shorter than if you built a third runway, well, another runway at somewhere like Gatwick or Birmingham, where there's the space to build a longer runway. This is old thinking, that you need a hub airport in a country with lots of runways and lots of terminals, like a singular airport, which works very well for the Netherlands with Schiphol, for example. But the UK is different. I mean, it's thinking that doesn't really work in this country, and where, you're going to have to knock down villages, turf people out of their homes, build loads more infrastructure around the area, which is already chock-a-block anyway. There's no more room really for more roads, more. Where are you going to put all the things that need to service the extra planes that are going to go, come into the third runway if they can? I think it's a really, bad idea, to be honest. Then, she's talking about a lower Thames crossing. Well, that's been in the pipeline as well for a very long time. She's approved it. That isn't such a bad idea. It needs to be done to allow extra roadways so that trucks and lorries can go from the Channel Tunnel up to the Midlands and so on. Okay, so that's fair enough. But another thing which people have been talking about for a long time, which I think is hugely destructive, is this idea of the Oxford to Cambridge arc. Now, if you look at a map, I've just got this map here from Google Maps. This is the area with Oxford's down in the bottom left-hand corner. Oxford, Cambridge is up in the top right-hand corner. Between the two cities there, the two ancient, medieval anyway, university cities, it's mostly rural, mostly farmland, villages, small towns where everyone's happy and everyone just gets on with life. There's some larger places in between Bedford and Milton Keynes, but apart from them, it's mostly very, very rural. People don't want it to change. But the idea of this Oxford to Cambridge arc is that it will change into something a little bit like this. There will be lots and lots of construction and new towns and factories and roads and all kinds of things. Most of the homes that will be built there will be occupied by migrants coming into the country to get benefits or whatever, and possibly to work in whatever godforsaken places they want to put there. The idea, she says, is we're going to turn this area into Europe's Silicon Valley. Well, anything which is a big government project to fill in a whole area with development, it just doesn't work. I mean, the only people it works for are the people who get the contracts to do some building. They build these horrible carbuncles all over prime agricultural land, and then they make a lot of profit out of it. But it's no good for the people that live there at the moment. And I really don't want to see the English countryside, or Welsh, Scottish, Northern Irish countryside as well in other parts of the country. But I certainly don't want to see the English countryside there between Oxford and Cambridge turned into an urban nightmare, which seems to be what the plan is from the Uniparty. I mean, this was mooted by the fake Conservatives as well. Now it's being brought up again by the Labour government. Is it going to actually boost the economy? Well, no, it isn't, because what's going to happen is that taxpayers will be fleeced for money, which goes to the government when the government gives out contracts to do construction, and you end up with some hideous nightmare scape on prime agricultural land, which should be used for growing food, which we need for the people who are already in the country to eat. They don't seem to understand this. We do not want the countryside filled in with hideous new smart cities and 15-minute cities and all this kind of stuff. She then says net zero. Net zero is an opportunity. We need to think of net zero as an opportunity. We need growth to meet our climate goals. Well, the whole edifice of net zero and climate alarmism just needs to be removed and got rid of. If you got rid of net zero, that would stimulate economic growth immediately, because businesses would not be restricted by extra carbon taxes and restrictions on what energy they can use. And most other countries in the world are not doing this. China, India, Russia, they don't care about restricting carbon dioxide emissions at all. Neither should we, because it's a whole nonsense. So there we go. But that's one of the things that she's saying. Again, that's not going to stimulate economic growth. It's going to have the opposite effect. And even people in Parliament are now saying, we need... I don't agree with the first part of this sentence, but they say we need to meet our net zero targets without damaging the economy. Well, you can't do both. Meeting these net zero targets will damage the economy, because we restrict the continuous high quality stream of energy we have from carbon-based energy, which we've used for 200 years. You can't do both. So net zero has to go, and that's Heritage Party policy, of course, as you know. The other thing which I mentioned just at the beginning, which is going to be immensely damaging to the country and our heritage and our history and our farmland and so on, is to completely change the planning regulations so that local people basically won't be able to oppose anything that is imposed on a local area by the national government. So if they say, well, we're going to build a third runway at Heathrow. We're going to take this land in Cambridgeshire and Oxfordshire and we're going to build a new town on it for 100,000 people. Local people will lose the right to oppose that because they want to bring in the next beast of a bill that they're bringing in just soon is going to be called the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. And this is going to change the planning system because at the moment, local councils have to approve any development. It has to go according to the local plan that they write, which gives local people a chance, if not to stop something that is unpopular in a local area, such as a big new housing development or a solar farm in Lincolnshire, like they're going to build with this Labour donor. You know, that's another dreadful thing, building all these solar wind farms on prime agricultural land. Again, that makes our food security less and means we're further away from being self-sufficient in food as we should be, and energy. But you know what this planning infrastructure bill is going to do is take away the right of local people to object. So you know, you might object to something and you might win. It's very hard to win if you've got all the money of these developers trying to push something, development or scheme in a local area, and it's got the backing of government. But you can, you know, sometimes get a judicial review and they stop it if it doesn't, you know, meet the regulations or local plans that are in place. But they want to sweep that away so they can say from, you know, basically like the bureaucracy in Westminster can say, yep, we want a new town there, we're going to build it, and nobody has a right to oppose it. You can oppose it, but you're not, your voice isn't going to go anywhere. They want to change the planning system to take away local people and even to override local councils in the planning decisions that are made. So they can say, oh yeah, we want a massive solar farm in wherever, Lincolnshire, Oxfordshire, Wiltshire, Cornwall. These are areas which are plagued with these things at the moment, or a battery storage system, you know, which is very, very dangerous if they catch fire. This is the crazy idea that comes out of net zero ideology as well. So they're just going to go ahead and build these things. They can't at the moment because at the moment people still have a right to object. So it takes them a long time to get it through, even if they do. They want to sweep that out of the way so they can just do what they want, wherever they want, whenever they want, which is completely anti-democratic. It's against our freedom, and it will destroy our heritage, our history, our farmland, our countryside, our ancient beautiful towns and cities, even more than they have been destroyed already. And this is Labour. It's basically communist. It's like the Bolsheviks, you know, or the Chinese Communist Party. You can see, yeah, they've got all these new massive swanky cities, but there's nothing left of their history in farmland, and all the villages. A lot of villages have just been bulldozed. You know, and you see these horrible carbuncles go up in the middle of the countryside. I've been to China and I've seen it. You know, it's very disturbing. You come to a place where there was a village and there were farmers and they were farming, and suddenly you see this, you know, 10 40-story blocks of smart flats have just been erected in the middle of nowhere, and then people are living in there and they're all miserable and they're all subjected to the rules that they obey. Well, I don't want England to be like that, or Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland. I want it to remain a country where local people can care for their local areas and look after their history and heritage. But this Labour Party, you know, is essentially a communist party. They're imposing communism without a violent revolution. They don't need to anymore because so many people just acquiesce. When are we going to get up and say, no, we're not going to have this? Well, hopefully it's soon. Peacefully, of course, at the ballot box, which is what I'm trying to do with the Heritage Party. But there we go. You know, if they want to increase growth, stimulate growth, they need to row back on all of the dreadful decisions that they've done already. You need to scrap inheritance tax rather than increasing it. You need to reduce taxation on businesses rather than increase it. You know, at least row back this dreadful new limit for employers' national insurance, where they have every employee is going to cost employers another £1,000 a year on average, because they've reduced the threshold for employers' national insurance from April, which is going to make businesses bankrupt and is going to make workers lose their jobs, because businesses are going to find the money to pay this. So, well, they won't be hiring any new workers, and they'll be laying off some workers that they already have. And the ones that are there will have to work harder, or maybe do, a couple of hours of overtime a week without getting paid, for example, so that the businesses can keep on functioning. This is not a well-functioning economy, because we've got so much extra taxation, so many burdens put on people and individuals and households and businesses, so that they're all going under. And then she comes along, she's got the gall to say, oh, we're going to stimulate growth by doing all kinds of things which aren't going to do anything at all, and which are going to continue to ruin our nation. We need to reduce the burden of taxation. And she talks about reducing regulations, but there's so many more regulations and more impositions on people that wealth creators are leaving the UK. They're not just leaving, they're fleeing the UK. So apparently 145,000 millionaires have already left the UK. 400,000 landlords are selling up. They've either sold up already, or they're selling up because they don't want to be landlords in the private rented sector anymore, because they're not going to be able to make a profit. And to the Labour Party, profit is a dirty word. Profit is good. I don't agree with exploitation, but we need to allow people the opportunities to be rewarded for their own work and for their own creativity and for their own industry. And they are just squashing anybody who does not want to be a client of the state, dependent on the state for a little bit of money, a little bit of welfare. No real ambition, but just someone who is, attached to the state, getting your universal basic income. They don't like wealth creators who actually, because that gives people freedom and independence, and it also grows the economy as well. But they're attacking the very things that do grow the economy. They don't seem to understand this, because they actually think the state is the economy, whereas I think the economy is the economy, and the state should not be interfering with it. It just needs to be a small thing over here. The economy is the big thing, where civil society is what the country is, and everyone gets on and does what they want to do, and the state just provides the framework for people to be free and have the opportunity to do whatever they want to succeed or fail, to run or walk or sit down and not do anything if you want to. But if you do that, nothing much is going to happen for you. But there you go. So another disaster and piece of horrendous gaslighting, essentially, from the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who is continuing to demolish the economy quite purposefully while pretending that she's not, as is the whole Starmer regime. They're actively demolishing everything that's left of British society and culture and the economy, I guess because they hate this country. So they need to be gone. And we're going to try and do what we can to get rid of them in the Heritage Party and stand candidates in the elections that are coming up and through the years that follow. So just realise, when she says she's for growth, she's not. Thanks for listening, everybody. God bless you all.